Tonight, the beekeeping industry is in crisis over the shocking and unexplained deaths of hundreds of millions of bees over the last 8 months. Now, this could impact all of the U.S. as bees, called the backbone of agriculture, are responsible for pollinating, get this, more than a third of the nation's crops.
November of 2006, a bee yard in central Florida, just outside Tampa. Dave Hackenberg, a commercial beekeeper from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, has worked these hives for 50 years. Every winter, he trucks his 3,000 colonies south to overwinter in the warmth, the way his father taught him. The hives should be heavy with honey by now, the bees clustered tight against the cool Florida nights, the queens still laying, the brood still developing. Hackenberg pries open the first lid, and the moment stops him cold. The hive is empty, not collapsed in any conventional sense. There are no piles of bodies on the ground, no clue at all. The honey sits untouched on the frames, the pollen stores look full, and the queen rests alone among her brood. But the workforce of tens of thousands of adult workers that should be defending this colony has simply vanished. He moves to the next hive, then the next, and the same impossible silence greets him in every box he opens. By the time he finishes counting, half of his 3,000 hives are hollow. Come spring, 2,000 of them will be lost. Hackenberg picks up the phone and calls a researcher at Penn State. The words he speaks will, within months, become a worldwide news story. It was like a ghost town. Welcome to the unknown archive. What Dave Hackenberg discovered in that Florida bee yard in November of 2006 was the leading edge of a crisis that has now stretched on for almost 20 years. The damage runs into the billions of dollars. One of the most important industries in American agriculture sits on life support. As of 2025, scientists still cannot agree on what is causing it. This is the story of colony collapse disorder. By February of 2007, Hackenberg's story had reached the press. Researchers at Penn State, led by Diana Cox Foster, alongside Dennis vanEngelsdorp, Jeff Pettis, and Jim and Marianne Frazier, formed what they called the Colony Collapse Disorder Working Group. They gave the phenomenon an official name. The criteria were specific. Adult worker bees would vanish en masse. Almost no dead bodies could be found inside or near the hive. And yet the queen, the brood, and abundant honey and pollen all remained. Strangest of all, neighboring bees and pests refused to invade the empty hive, as if the dead colony carried some invisible mark. That same year, the Apiary Inspectors of America launched their first nationwide survey, and the numbers came back ugly. American beekeepers lost 32% of their managed colonies that winter, and the following year, the figure climbed to 36%. For decades, beekeepers had treated a 20% winter loss as survivable. They were now burying nearly twice that every single year. The scale of what stood at stake came into focus quickly. In February of 2014, United States Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack announced that honeybee pollination supported an estimated $15 billion in American agriculture, including more than 130 fruits and vegetables. The list reads like a walk through the produce aisle of any American supermarket. Almonds, apples, blueberries, cherries, cranberries, melons, cucumbers, squash, and avocados, the foundation of a nutritious American diet. Nowhere is that dependence more visible than in California. Each February, in a coordinated event with no parallel in the modern world, beekeepers across the country load roughly 2 million honeybee colonies, around 70% of every commercial hive in the United States, onto trucks bound for California's Central Valley. Some of those trucks roll out of North Dakota, others from South Dakota, Florida, or Maine, and a few cover more than 2,000 miles before they unload. The bees end up among 1.4 million acres of almond trees, asked to pollinate a crop worth more than $4 billion a year. Without them, there are no almonds. By any measure, the operation moves roughly 60 billion bees across America in the space of a few weeks, the largest pollination event in human history. Through every year that followed Hackenberg's discovery, the bees kept dying. Scientists went looking for the cause, and the early years of investigation produced a long list of suspects with almost no convictions. In September of 2007, Diana Cox Foster's team published a paper in the journal Science linking colony collapse disorder to a virus called Israeli acute paralysis virus, first identified in Jerusalem in 2004. The virus had hitched a ride into the United States that same year on imported Australian bees, the first foreign bees allowed into the country since 1922. The virus alone failed to explain everything. Some hives infected with it survived just fine, while uninfected hives still collapsed for reasons no one could trace. Researchers turned next to a parasite called Varroa destructor, a mite that arrived on American shores in 1987. The mite latches onto adult bees and feeds on their fat tissue. Worse still, it acts as a vector, essentially functioning as a needle that injects bees with viruses, including Deformed Wing Virus, the disease that leaves bees with shriveled, useless wings. The trouble was, Varroa had been in the country for nearly 2 decades before colony collapse disorder ever appeared. Something else in the system had changed. That something else turned out to be pesticides, a class of chemicals called neonicotinoids, with names like imidacloprid, clothianidin, and thiamethoxam, manufactured by Bayer and Syngenta, had spread across American agriculture starting in the 1990s. These chemicals work systemically, meaning a coated seed grows into a plant that is toxic to insects, from root to flower. By the middle of the 2000s, neonicotinoids coated nearly every corn and soybean field in the country. In 2012, a Harvard researcher named Chen-Sheng Liu published a study claiming neonicotinoids triggered colony collapse disorder. He published a second in 2014. Beekeepers, including Jeff Anderson of California Minnesota honey farms, said it confirmed what they had been seeing in their own fields for years. Anderson called it the perfect crime. In a 2016 lawsuit against the Environmental Protection Agency, Hackenberg testified that he had lost more colonies in the previous 10 years to the after-effects of neonicotinoid seed coatings than in his first 40-plus years of beekeeping combined. In April of 2013, the European Union imposed a partial ban on the 3 flagship neonicotinoids, and 5 years later, in April of 2018, that ban grew into a complete outdoor prohibition. The United States did not follow. Industry scientists at Bayer pushed back hard, arguing Liu's doses were unrealistic, and other independent entomologists agreed the methodology had problems. Diana Cox Foster pointed out something almost no one wanted to hear. Amish beekeepers, who used no industrial chemicals at all, were losing hives. Organic operations were losing hives too. Conventional operations sitting next door to them were sometimes fine. The simple story did not fit. The leading scientists began talking about something else entirely, and Dennis vanEngelsdorp, by then at the University of Maryland, called the phenomenon a death by 1,000 cuts. May Berenbaum, head of entomology at the University of Illinois, told an interviewer in 2011 that no real consensus existed on cause, only mounting evidence that bees were under simultaneous assault from multiple pathogens, multiple stresses, and dramatically reduced nutrition. The American countryside, once stitched with wildflower meadows and clover pastures, had become a monoculture of corn and soybeans. Marla Spivak of the University of Minnesota quoted a North Dakota beekeeper who put it bluntly, Honeybees, wild bees, and other pollinators were reduced to feeding on scraps. The story turned out to be almost too complicated for the news cycle, with no single villain to blame and no easy fix to chase. By 2015, classic colony collapse disorder, the no-bodies ghost town signature Hackenberg had walked into back in Florida, was becoming rarer. The bees themselves, however, kept dying in record numbers, and the picture had changed. Now, beekeepers found dead bodies on the ground and shriveled, deformed wings on the survivors. The disorder still had a name. What was killing the bees did not. That changed when the winter of 2024 to 2025 arrived. By March of 2025, alarm calls were going out across the industry. A nonprofit research organization known as Project APIS-EM, founded in partnership with the Almond Board of California, surveyed 702 beekeepers, managing roughly 70% of the commercial bees in the country. The results were almost incomprehensible. Commercial beekeepers, the men and women whose bees pollinate American food, had lost an average of 62% of their hives between June of 2024 and early 2025. Texas operations reported losses of 2/3. State by state, annual loss ran from 34% to 90%. By the final tally, roughly 1.6 million colonies had vanished, and the damages climbed to an estimated $600 million. Scott McArt, an associate professor of entomology at Cornell, told reporters the early numbers suggested this would be the biggest loss of honeybee colonies in United States history. Danielle Downey, executive director of Project APIS-EM, put it more simply. It was like the bees were slipping through their fingers in days. One anonymous beekeeper, responding to the survey, wrote, "We don't even have the dead bees. They are gone too." Patty Sundberg, president of the American Beekeeping Federation, warned that beekeeping businesses faced threats to their survival they had never seen before. Jeffrey Williams of Auburn University, who co-runs the national survey, said plainly that some companies would never recover and others would simply throw in the towel. Blake Shook, a Texas commercial beekeeper, told CBS News in March of 2025 that if the disaster turned into a multi-year event, it would change the way Americans consumed food. Pollination at the scale needed to feed the country, he said, was no longer guaranteed. Shook described one specific phone call. A friend of his had begun the winter with 20,000 beehives and now had fewer than 1,000. The friend told him simply that he was done. In June of 2025, the United States Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Research Service released a preprint with a partial answer. Samples from the affected colonies showed astonishing levels of deformed wing virus types A and B, alongside acute bee paralysis virus. Almost every Varroa mite they examined carried genes for resistance to amitraz, the chemical American beekeepers had relied on for decades to control the parasite. The mites, in other words, had outrun the medicine, and the viruses had moved in to fill the gap. The investigation, however, was missing a piece. Pesticide testing, the analysis that might have told scientists how big a role chemicals played in this specific catastrophe, had been delayed by staffing cuts at the Department of Agriculture. Cornell University stepped in to fill the gap, and Scott McArt's lab agreed to run mass spectrometry on 500 samples, paid for by a single anonymous private donor. As of this writing, those results are still pending. Here is where America stands today. The total number of managed honeybee colonies in the United States, on paper, has not collapsed. The figure hovers around 2.6 million. Roughly where it has sat for 2 decades. That number masks a darker reality. Beekeepers replace dead hives constantly by splitting their survivors, buying packages from southern states, and pouring money into queens, equipment, feed, and treatments. Marla Spivak has noted that more honeybees die in the United States every year than all other livestock animals slaughtered combined. The crisis is one of replacement, of attrition, of an industry running on a treadmill that speeds up every single year. Native pollinators have fared even worse. The rusty-patched bumblebee, once common across the eastern United States, has fallen by roughly 90%. In 2017, it became the first bee in the continental United States ever listed under the Endangered Species Act. 22% of American butterfly species have declined by more than half in just the last 2 decades. You may have heard a famous quote attributed to Albert Einstein, warning that if the bee disappeared, mankind would have only 4 years left to live. Einstein never said it. The line cannot be found in any of his writings, his speeches, or his correspondence. Its earliest version appeared in a French magazine in 1965 and was popularized by an apiculture pamphlet in 1994. The quote got attached to the most famous mind of the 20th century because we needed someone to have warned us. What is actually true is more sobering and harder to fit on a poster. If America's honeybees disappear entirely, the almonds go with them. Blueberries decline sharply. Apples become a luxury crop. The nutritional foundation of the American diet, the produce aisle and the orchard, does not vanish overnight, but it bends. Fresh food becomes scarcer. Prices climb. The variety of the daily American table becomes the privilege of the few rather than the expectation of the many. The bees are not dying because of one thing. They are dying because the country they were brought to in the 1600s, never native and always imported, has become a place where every kind of stress is happening at once. The mites have evolved past the medicine. The viruses are stronger than ever. The chemicals are everywhere, and the wildflowers are gone. Each February, the trucks roll out of California with more empty boxes than the year before. Dave Hackenberg, the man who first called Penn State from a Florida bee yard nearly 20 years ago, is still keeping bees, and so is his son. So are the Adays in South Dakota, the Andersons in Minnesota, the Wheelers in Texas, and the Brownings in Idaho. They keep going because the alternative is unthinkable. Jeff Pettis, a retired research scientist with the Department of Agriculture, who spent his career studying these insects, put it best in October of 2025. "I can't imagine," he said, "another 60% year loss coming back to back. It would be catastrophic for the industry." The bees themselves know none of this. Each morning they fly out of their hives in search of flowers, and each night they come back carrying what they have managed to find. The queen lays her eggs. Her workers tend the brood. They do what bees have always done. Something is killing them. Almost 20 years after Dave Hackenberg opened that first empty hive in Florida, after billions of dollars of research, after lawsuits and bans and breakthroughs and breakdowns, the question that started it all has not gone away. The question of what is killing America's bees still has no answer. The ghost town is still spreading. No one, not the scientists, not the beekeepers, not the Department of Agriculture itself, can yet say with any certainty when it will stop.